Hey everybody, and welcome back to the TNT Smoke Factory. I'm your host TJ Tilford, alongside my dad Terrence Tilford, and we're here to bring you a unique look at college football, both inside and outside the lines. We're here on the campus of the Ohio State University today, right outside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and we're going to talk a little bit about Buckeye football and give you our preview and predictions of this upcoming season.
Absolutely. Anytime you're talking Buckeye football, you're talking about high expectations. But before we get into the expectations of this year, let's take a quick look at last year. So last year, we know that the Buckeyes, they had a whole lot of offensive weapons out there. You had the number one receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. You also had a very talented running back in Travion Henderson. And then the defense came along and performed really well.
Yeah.
I think a lot was being said about the Silver Bullets being back. That defense really stood up, and they stood up all the way up until the final week of the season. Then they met a very, very ready Michigan football team. Michigan, was armed. They had a whole lot of people coming back, and they served the Buckeyes up the third loss in a row.
Yeah.
So that's big. But then I think you would have thought some motivation would have been coming out after that. But then the Buckeyes go into the bowl game and they lay an egg against a Missouri team, which, that Missouri team was a little bit better than a lot of people had anticipated.
Yeah.
But yet and still, we expected the Buckeyes to go in there and do what we expect the Buckeyes to do, and that's win. And they didn't do that. So I would say if we look at last year, they did not meet the expectations that was set before.
I would agree. And I must say, finishing that season last year, after that loss to Missouri, I was worried about the Buckeyes. You know, I was like, is this the shift from the Ohio State of the past, always dominating, to maybe a lesser Ohio State team that we rarely ever see? Because, a loss to the SEC, that's understandable. But Missouri, I just wasn't expecting Ohio State to lose that game.
Not at all.
But what did they do? They came back and they reloaded the clip, and they reloaded the clip heavy. You've got Will Howard coming in, quarterback from Kansas State. This is a guy with a lot of playing experience and a guy that brings something to the Ohio State offense that we probably haven't seen since Justin Fields, and that's the ability to run the ball. You've got Quinshawn Judkins, explosive running back, transfer from Ole Miss. This is a guy that's going to get a lot of carries. He's going to be effective in this offense.
Yes.
Might be a sleeper for running back of the year this year.
We'll see. With Travion being back there, that's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah. And then you bring in the big one, Caleb Downs, transfer safety from Alabama. He was a freshman last year, but he led that defense in tackles.
Yes.
This is a guy
as a freshman.
Yes. This is a guy that's going to make an impact on this defense, and I'm excited to see him play this fall. And then some returning production. You've got Denzel Burke coming back at cornerback.
Shutdown.
Trey Henderson, we already mentioned him earlier, running back. When he's healthy, could be the best running back in the nation.
And he has that game breaker ability that I think Judkins doesn't quite possess. That ability that once he hits that secondary, it's a foot race, and he's typically going to win.
Yes. You've got Emeka Ibuka coming back for his senior year.
Man, incredible.
I'm excited to see what he does at the number one receiver. He's always been the number two behind Marv, but he's always shined in that position as well. I'm excited to see how he operates as a number one this year.
Absolutely.
You've got Tyleek Williams coming back on that D-line. This is a guy that's had an impact for the past 2 seasons. He's going to be a good addition, or not addition, but he's a good returner for this Ohio State team.
Brings a lot of leadership to the field.
And then you've got both your ends coming back, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau out. So that's going to be good for that D-line as well.
Yeah. Now, my only worry with that is JT had a little bit of off and on going or going on last season. I want to see him come in and dominate week in and week out. Consistency is a word for him this season.
And it doesn't even have to be like that performance he had at Penn State.
I don't know if he can match that. That was crazy.
When he had a bunch of interceptions.
Yes, that was crazy.
Probably the best D-line game we've seen
ever.
Maybe ever, yeah. That was a really good game from him. And then let's talk about some new guys on campus, some freshmen coming in. You've got Julian Sand. I don't expect him to get too many minutes this year with Will Howard being the quarterback, but this is a guy to look for in the future, a guy that will get minutes this year. Jeremiah Smith.
Absolutely.
#1 player coming out of that 2024 class. He's going to be an explosive wide receiver, big kid.
Yes.
You know, when I first saw him, I didn't know he was that strong.
Yes.
He got onto campus. You start to see pictures. He looks as big as LeBron, and he has the height. He's going to be a scary wide receiver this year.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't be surprised if his overall production is even higher than Emeka Egbuka's.
It could very well happen.
It's really going to put the defense in a bind to see who do you want to focus on. And right now, I think they might focus a little bit more on Emeka because he's the proven product.
Yes.
One person we didn't mention is Aaron Nolan. And how is he going to figure into the mix? You know, we have a lot of hype going around Julian Saying, but then you get a little bit of chatter, a little bit of buzz when you hear his name being mentioned as well. So be interesting to see how that all plays out.
And I know the spring game doesn't mean much, but I would even say Aaron Nolan might have been a little bit better than Julian Saying, had a better showing in the spring game than Saying did.
I would agree. All right, so now let's get into probably the most talked about area of this Buckeye team, and that's who's going to be under center. I say without a doubt, we're talking about Will Howard is taking the snaps at #1.
Yes.
And when you hear that, a lot of people will like to compare him against Kyle McCord and say that he's just Kyle McCord 2.0. I beg to differ. I think he is a totally different quarterback than Kyle McCord. Now, you got to give McCord his credit. You're talking about McCord last year with 65% completion ratio, but you look at Will Howard had a 61% completion ratio.
Yeah.
So that's not too far off. But then you always got to take the stats into context. And if you take them into context, you look at Will Howard did not have the weapons that Kyle McCord had. Kyle McCord had weapons at every position. You're talking about a running back that he could swing the ball out for a lot of yards. You got receivers at wide and you got receivers in the slot. Now you look at what Will Howard had. Basically, he had a tight end product. Outside of that tight end, nobody was drafted from Kansas State in terms of skilled positions.
Yeah.
So he got all that production, 61% completion ratio. I think he was 500 less yards than Kyle McCord. But then you add in the X factor. He brings those legs.
Yes.
Will Howard is a big quarterback, and he doesn't mind putting his head down and getting some yards. I think that is the biggest difference between them, because what really hurt the Buckeyes last year was McCord's inability to create inside the pocket.
Extend plays when they needed to be extended.
And he didn't show the mobility that was necessary, particularly with that young offensive line.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that offensive line is shored up a bit this year. If so, I think this is a very, very dangerous Ohio State football team.
And I'll say, I don't think Will Howard will bring the Justin Fields type running ability, but I think he can bring that JT Barrett after the leg injury ability where he can still get it done on his legs and be effective.
I agree.
It gives the defense something else to look at.
You look over the course of Will Howard's career, he's busted some long games.
He has.
But what I like about him most is when you need those short yardage, he gets it for you.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the difference. Keep those chains moving.
Yeah. Now, before we get into the record predictions, let's go over some 2024 expectations for this team. This is the most talented team in college football.
Absolutely.
I think that's without a doubt.
Absolutely.
The expectations first, you have to beat Michigan this year. You have to.
Number one.
You know, Ohio State's had 3 years losing to Michigan. This is not expected. I'm pretty sure this hasn't happened since 95, 97.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you have to beat Michigan this year.
Absolutely.
After that, you have to win the Big Ten.
Yes.
You know, Ohio State hasn't won the Big Ten since 2020, that COVID year. Justin Fields, when they went to the Sugar Bowl, ended up beating Clemson, getting to the national championship.
The short year.
It's been 3 years since the Buckeyes have got to the Big Ten championship. That's a must.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I think the playoffs, that should be a lock. You know, you shouldn't finish with more than 2 losses. You should get into the playoffs with ease.
You can't miss the playoffs. We're talking 12 teams. How do you miss the playoffs with 12 teams?
Yeah, especially
that would be unacceptable.
The Ohio State University.
Absolutely.
We're talking about a top 5 program in college football history. There shouldn't be a year where you do miss the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, not at all.
But the big expectation, you're the most talented team. You need to bring a national championship.
You got to bring home the hardware.
It has to.
You're great. You look great on paper. Look awesome. And if we could go straight off paper, I think we run the whole schedule, no problem. But that's why we play the games, and that's why Ohio State has to show up week in and week out playing the games. Stop playing around with lesser competition. Put people to rest early in the game, and then let's get some experience going through the depth chart.
Yes. Now let's go ahead and get to these record predictions. First week, you've got Akron. This should be a Buckeye beatdown, no question. Yeah, Ohio State absolutely. By 4 or 5 scores.
Starters out the game during the second quarter.
Next week, Western Michigan, another Buckeye beatdown shouldn't be a problem. If this was the PJ Fleck row the boat era down in Western Michigan, it might be a little different, but we're out the PJ Fleck
serious
era.
Decline since then.
Yes, serious decline. Another Buckeye beatdown.
Marshall, well, Marshall can surprise people at times, but I don't think this is one of those times.
Not at all.
I look at Ohio State to win and win big against Marshall. Give me 3 scores.
I would agree. 3 scores. Marshall, Marshall is a team on the uprise. They've got some talent, but I don't think you'll beat the Ohio State.
Absolutely.
Next week at Michigan State. Now, this is a Michigan State team that's looking to be improved. I'm excited to watch them play this year. They've got new coach Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. Turned that program around. Really good year there last year in the Pac-12.
Yes.
He also brought their backup quarterback, Aiden Charles. I think he'll be pretty good. He didn't get too many minutes since they had DJ Uiagalelei last year, but I think he'll be a quarterback that could be a sleeper in the Big Ten this year.
Okay, now I think culture, and I'm not sure he's had enough time to imprint his culture on this Michigan State team just yet. So I think we're going to see Sparty be Sparty. They're going to win some games that you don't expect them to win, but against the big competition, they're going to come up short. I look for Ohio State to win that game and win that game pretty soundly.
I would agree. I definitely have Ohio State winning. I'm just excited to see Michigan State overall play this year. Their next game, Iowa at home. Now, this is interesting to me. A lot of people keep talking about Iowa only finishing with potentially 1 loss, 2 losses, and getting to the Big Ten championship. I don't see it happening. We know Iowa's going to bring the defense. They do every single year. Their offense expects to be a little revamped. They still have Cade McNamara at quarterback, but I don't have faith in that Iowa offense. I do in their defense, not their offense. Ohio State big in this one.
Yeah, I don't have faith in Cade McNamara, and even though Iowa has a new offensive coordinator now, I still don't. I say it's going to take time for them to get to where they need to be offensively, and I think they'll put up more points than they did last year, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I still look for Ohio State to win that game pretty soundly. I want to say Ohio State will put at least 30 points on the board, and I think Iowa probably can only muster 10.
Now, their next game, by far their biggest game of the season outside the Michigan game. You're traveling to Oregon.
Absolutely.
This is going to be a big game. Probably could be game of the year. Oregon's got head coach Dan Lanning. He's my favorite coach in college football right now with the retirement of Nick Saban. I like him a lot. I thought he was going to take that Alabama job, decided to stay in Oregon. This is a very talented team. They bring in quarterback Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma to replace Bo Nix since he went to the draft. That was an offense that put up 531 yards per game and 44 points. That was a dominant Oregon offense last year, and you bring in a quarterback to try and keep that up. I don't think they'll be as dominant on offense, but they very well could. You still got your receiver core, and you added Evan Stewart, transfer receiver from Texas A&M. I look for him to have a big year this year. You also have some pieces that you added on defense. Jabbar Muhammad, transfer from Washington. They went to the national championship last year. And then you bring in Kobe Savage, another DB from Kansas State. So this defense, it's going to be pretty good. Probably the top 2 talented teams in the nation. I think Ohio State brings a little bit more. I think Oregon by far is the better coach team, although Ohio State did take Oregon's running back coach, Carlos Loughlin. They grabbed him from Oregon, so he's going to be a big addition for this Ohio State coaching squad. But, Oregon and Ohio State, top 2 talented teams, it's going to be close. It could come down to 1 possession. This is a game that I could switch my mind on, week in and week out. One week I'll pick Ohio State, the next I'll say, oh, Oregon's going to win this one.
Absolutely.
It's going to be close, but I think the big piece is that Dan Lanning, he hasn't won these big games, in my opinion. We're looking at 2 losses to Washington last year.
Go.
And Ryan Day, outside of Michigan, he's won the big games. I think Ohio State will win this one. It'll be very, very close.
Very close.
It could come down to who has the ball last.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder on that, because I really see this game being a mirror of the Washington-Oregon game, games of last year.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a whole lot of offense going on. Even though the Buckeyes have a stiff defense, I think that Oregon is going to be able to put some points up on the board. That's going to be inevitable, but I think the Buckeyes offense overall is going to put up more scores.
Very close. It'll be very close. Now their next week, Nebraska. Matt Rule going into his second year as head coach. And then you've also got
no faith.
Dylan Raiola, a kid that decommitted twice. First, he was committed here to The Ohio State University. Decommitted, committed to Georgia, decommitted there. So, you've got Nebraska. They're going to be a talented team. They're going to be a young team, though. And I look for Ohio State to win this game.
Absolutely. I don't have faith in Matt Rule. I got to be honest. I don't have faith in him. I look for Ohio State to go big. I think Dylan Raiola is going to get a real wake-up call to what college football is all about in that game. I look for several turnovers to happen during that game. I look for Ohio State to win by at least 3 scores.
Now their next game at Penn State. No, regardless of if it's going to be big noon or at night, it's going to be a whiteout game.
Whiteout game.
I hope it's at night. I like the whiteout crowd at night a little bit better than I do in the morning. We'll see. But to talk a little bit about Penn State, Drew Aller, his second year as a starting quarterback, struggled a little bit last year. He came in with some high expectations, but he struggled a bit.
I don't think he met any other expectations.
That's not ridiculous to say. I would agree with that. You do bring in a weapon for him, though. Julian Fleming, a transfer from The Ohio State University.
Serviceable receiver, but I can't call him a number 1. That's a stretch.
It's going to be a stretch. It's definitely going to be a stretch. I think he will be on this Penn State team. We'll see if he shines a bit. At The Ohio State University, he was always playing behind Chris Olave's, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka. He never really got his chance to shine, I'd say.
Right.
So we'll see how he does this year at Penn State. They also bring their running backs back, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen in the backfield. That's going to be a dangerous 2-headed monster, just like they were last year. I'm interested to see what they'll do. Against The Ohio State University, though, this is where Penn State always chokes. We know this. Ohio State, Michigan, the 2 games they can never get over. I expect this to be a talented Penn State team, but I don't think they'll be better than Ohio State. Ohio State, better coached, better talent. It's going to be interesting with the crowd, but The Ohio State will get this one.
Yeah, I agree. Penn State, I still think Franklin just can't get it done in those big moments. And now without the weapons that he's had in the past, I really don't see him getting it done. Yeah, it'll be a whiteout. It'll be a great atmosphere for that game. But yet and still, the Buckeyes come out and they win.
Their next game, Purdue. Purdue has gave Ohio State trouble in the past.
Yeah.
This will not be one of those years. I expect Ohio State to win big. Nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, they got shocked. What was that, 2018
with Dwayne Haskins.
Yes, they got shocked that year. I look for them to come out against Purdue ready this time. And, no shock value going on here. Ohio State wins, and I think they win that game pretty soundly as well.
Their next game at Northwestern. Northwestern is getting a new stadium, but not this year. So we're still going to have that outside weather, and that always makes it tricky. You look a few years back, Ohio State struggled against a sorry Northwestern team because the wind was going insane that game. You could barely pass the ball.
Yes.
So the weather will definitely affect this game. It's Chicago. It's Illinois. We know how the weather gets up there. It's the Windy City. The weather's going to play a big effect, but I think Ohio State, more talented, even if the weather does play a huge factor, you should win regardless.
Here's what my thing. It's going to be a late season game. So in Chicago, the wind's going to pick up more as the season goes along. I think the weather could be a huge factor in this game. And this is where Ohio State really has an opportunity to show what they have in that offensive line. I think you're going to have to take your running game to win that game. And I look for them to get it done. I want to see that line be dominant, not just good enough. I want to see them dominate. That's what I'm hoping to see against Northwestern.
Now their next game, Indiana. Indiana, they're a team, new head coach from James Madison. I think they're going to be decent this year. And their coach came out and called shots, saying they were pretty much going to beat everybody. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
You're not going to beat Ohio State. Ohio State wins this game.
Yeah, I think because of the shots that were thrown, Ohio State's going to throttle.
Yeah,
they,
just for talking crazy.
Yeah, you don't come out and give a juggernaut bulletin board material. No, you sneak in and win those games. He should have been a little bit more subtle in his approach. Since he wasn't, Ohio State wins big.
Now, their biggest game of the season.
Here it comes.
Nothing else matters. The game against Michigan, you've got them at home. They beat you the last 3 seasons.
3.
Now, they lost a lot to the draft this year.
Yes.
Don't have a lot of returning production. New head coach Sharon Moore. He did good when he had to step in as the interim coach.
He did.
But you've also got a new quarterback, Alex Orji.
Yes.
You returned Donovan Edwards in the backfield. Defense dropped a few pieces, but they look to be still dominant, still to be a top 5 defense in the country. We're going to see how this game goes. In my opinion, Ohio State, you cannot lose this game. I think Ohio State will win this game, and I look for them to win convincingly. A lot of people will think it'd be close. I think they should win by 2-3 scores.
I'm going to go a little differently. I think Ohio State does win the game. Let's put that out there immediately. I think they have so much on the line, so much to lose, and Ryan Day has so much on his shoulders. This is the hot seat game. This is going to decide whether or not he's here at The Ohio State University or not next year. So I think because of that, they're going to be very, very prepared. I think the last few seasons, they've been out-coached. It hasn't been about the talent that was on the field. They've been out-coached. And I think they know that now, and I think they're going to come in with more preparation to be ready to win that game. But here's the thing. We're talking about a Michigan team that, yes, they lost a lot in the draft, but I think that offensive line is going to be a reload and not a rebuild. And when you have a running back like Donovan Edwards behind that, they're going to be a solid team. They're going to hold the ball, and by them prolonging possessions, they're going to keep scores down. That's going to keep that game tight. And I say Ohio State wins, but I say Ohio State wins in a close one.
So there you have it. Both of us have Ohio State going 12-0 this season. Their floor, it's not a low floor. I could see you losing 3 games, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan. But at the same time, you shouldn't lose 3 games. No. 1 max, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Regardless, I think they should be a lock for the playoffs this year and look to be a number 1 or 2 seed in that playoffs, depending on how the SEC goes this year with Georgia, Alabama, teams like Texas. But that's what we have for The Ohio State.
I'm looking at Ohio State. Their stiffest game is probably going to be that Oregon game. It would not shock me if Ohio State, mark it, folks, Ohio State plays Oregon 3 times this year.
That's a hot take. I think they could see them. You got to see them regular season. I think you could see them Big Ten championship. Depending on how they schedule the playoffs, how they rank the teams, you could see them a 3rd time in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
It'll be interesting. That's going to be your toughest opponent, and you're going to have to see them probably multiple times this year.
And it's tough to beat a team 3 times in a row.
It's tough to beat a team twice, just twice in general.
Absolutely.
So there you have it, 12-0 for the Ohio State Buckeyes this year. I look for it to be a good season here in Columbus. If you're an Ohio State fan, there's a lot to be excited about. Make sure you guys follow all our channels listed below. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and we'll see you guys on the next one.